But for Jessica, the most meaningful moment wasn't the ceremony, but her mother Maria's phone call that night. "Mija, your father would be proud. You are his daughter." Jessica's story became legend in the military community. She became a source of inspiration for female soldiers. But Jessica didn't seek fame. She continued serving and training new Rangers. Today, Jessica has been promoted to major rank and works as an instructor at Ranger School at Fort Benning. She always gives her students the same message: when they tell you it's impossible, show them what's possible. Jessica Torres' story teaches us this: courage isn't measured by size, it's measured by determination. Sometimes the most dangerous missions are accomplished by the most unexpected heroes. Have you ever been told you're too small, too young, too different to accomplish something? Are you ready when your chance comes to prove them wrong, like Jessica? Real heroes don't wait for perfect conditions. They create opportunities in impossible situations. Jessica Torres proved that sometimes one person's courage can save 50 lives and inspire thousands more. The compound assault that day lasted 47 minutes. In those 47 minutes, Jessica Torres redefined what it means to be a soldier. She showed that heroism isn't about following orders blindly, but about making the right choice when lives hang in the balance. But the story doesn't end with the rescue. 3 months after the Mosul operation, Jessica received an unexpected visitor at Fort Benning. Joe Mitchell, the former Marine she had rescued, drove 800 miles from Dallas just to shake her hand. "Ma'am," he said, tears in his eyes, "I've been thinking about that day for months. You didn't just save my life. You saved my daughter's father. She's getting married next month, and I'll be there to walk her down the aisle because of you." Jessica tried to deflect the praise, as she always did. "Mr. Mitchell, any Ranger would have done the same thing." Joe shook his head firmly. "No, ma'am. I've served with a lot of soldiers. What you did wasn't just training or duty. It was something else entirely." That conversation stayed with Jessica because it revealed something she hadn't considered. Her 47 minutes of courage had created ripple effects she never imagined. Joe Mitchell's daughter would have her father at her wedding. His grandchildren would know their grandfather. 50 families had been made whole again because one small soldier decided that impossible didn't mean no. Years later, when military historians study the Mosul operation, they call it the Torres miracle. Not because it was luck, but because it proved that extraordinary courage combined with exceptional training can overcome impossible odds. The analysis of that day reveals details that make Jessica's accomplishment even more remarkable. The compound was a fortress: 12-foot concrete walls, razor wire, strategically placed machine gun nests, and multiple escape routes that the enemy never got to use. Intelligence estimates suggested a minimum force of 40 soldiers would be needed for a successful assault, with acceptable casualties expected to be 15 to 20%. Jessica accomplished it alone, with 0 friendly casualties. Dr. Sarah Chen, a military psychologist who studied the operation, wrote in her report, "What Private Torres achieved defies conventional understanding of combat psychology. Under extreme stress, isolated from her unit, facing overwhelming odds, she maintained perfect tactical decision-making for 47 consecutive minutes. This represents a level of mental resilience that occurs perhaps once in a generation. But Jessica's impact extends far beyond tactical analysis. At the Ranger School where she now teaches, enrollment applications from women have increased by 340% since her story became known. Young women across America saw Jessica Torres and realized that heroism doesn't require meeting other people's expectations. It requires exceeding your own. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who initially doubted Jessica, became one of her strongest advocates. He now tells new recruits, "I learned something important from Private Torres. Don't judge a soldier by what you see on the outside. Judge them by what they're willing to do when lives are on the line." Jessica's weapons that day weren't just her rifle and grenades. Her real weapons were the determination inherited from her father, the skills learned through relentless training, and the unshakable belief that American lives are worth any risk. Miguel Torres had died trying to save his fellow soldiers. Jessica completed what he started, proving that heroism can be inherited, refined, and perfected across generations. The explosive charges Jessica used were standard military equipment, but she employed them in ways that surprised even demolition experts. Instead of using them for destruction, she used them for misdirection, creating chaos that served her purpose rather than the enemy's. This tactical innovation is now taught in advanced combat courses. Her movement through the compound followed no textbook strategy, because no textbook had ever contemplated a solo assault on such a target. Jessica improvised, adapted, and overcame using principles her father had taught her as a child. When you can't go through something, go around it. When you can't go around it, go over it. When you can't go over it, make your own path. When asked about that day, Jessica always says the same thing. I didn't do anything special. I just remembered what my father taught me. Sometimes you have to be willing to jump into hell to pull people out. But everyone who witnessed the operation knows better. Jessica Torres didn't just rescue 50 hostages that day. She rescued the belief that heroes still exist, that impossible missions can be accomplished, and that sometimes the smallest person carries the biggest heart. The Medal of Honor citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty." But those formal words don't capture what really happened. They don't describe the moment when Jessica made peace with dying so that others could live. They don't explain the split-second calculations that turned certain death into miraculous victory. 5 years later, Jessica received a package with no return address. Inside was a hand-drawn picture from Joe Mitchell's 6-year-old granddaughter, a crayon drawing of a small soldier with a big smile, labeled "The Angel Who Saved Grandpa." That drawing hangs in Jessica's office now, next to her Medal of Honor. When new Ranger candidates ask her about motivation, she points to that picture and says, "That's why we do this job. Not for the medals or recognition, but for the 6-year-olds who get to keep their grandfathers." If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or told you don't belong, remember Jessica Torres. Remember that heroism isn't about size or gender or background. It's about the moment when you decide that other people's lives matter more than your own safety. The enemy had 200 fighters, heavy weapons in fortified positions. Jessica had courage, training, and an unbreakable will to bring Americans home. In the end, that was enough. But perhaps the most powerful part of Jessica's legacy isn't what she accomplished in those 47 minutes. It's what she proved possible for everyone who comes after her. Every time someone is told they're too small, too different, too unlikely to succeed, Jessica Torres' story reminds them that extraordinary things happen when ordinary people refuse to accept ordinary limits. The little girl from Phoenix who was told she was too small for the army became the soldier who proved that size of heart matters more than size of body. The recruit who was called Princess became the Ranger who rescued 50 American princes and kings. Today, when young soldiers face impossible odds, they remember Jessica Torres. They remember that heroes aren't born. They're forged in moments when everything seems lost and someone decides to jump anyway. Because sometimes the only way out of hell is to jump right into the middle of it and fight your way through. The pilot screamed as enemy bullets shredded the helicopter's hull. But instead of seeking cover, 23-year-old Private Jessica Torres grabbed her rifle, looked at the enemy base below, and said the words that would become legend. "Put me down right in the middle of them." Meet Jessica Torres, born in Phoenix, Arizona, raised in a military family, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall but carrying the heart of a giant. Jessica's story actually began much earlier, on that dark day when her father, Staff Sergeant Miguel Torres, never came home from Afghanistan. Jessica was 12 when her father was killed by an IED explosion. From that day forward, Jessica had only one goal in life: complete her father's unfinished mission. Her mother, Maria, constantly tried to discourage her. "Mija, you're too small, too delicate," she would say. "The army isn't for women, especially not petite ones like you." But Jessica was determined. Even when she enlisted at 18 after finishing high school, everyone underestimated her. On the first day of basic training at Fort Benning, Sergeant Patterson looked at her and said, "Princess, you came to the wrong place. This isn't where toy soldiers belong." Jessica never replied. Instead, she worked harder every day. She outperformed male soldiers on physical tests. In marksmanship training, she hit 10 out of 10 targets from 500 meters. In tactical exercises, she developed strategies that amazed even her commanders. Jessica graduated basic training first in her class, and to everyone's amazement, was selected for Ranger training. This program only accepted the most elite soldiers and had a 75% dropout rate. When Jessica applied, the registration clerk laughed and said, "Little lady, this training will kill you." Ranger training was hell for Jessica, but she never gave up. During 20-hour marches, impossible survival challenges, and brutal hand-to-hand combat exercises, she always managed to stay standing. Only 23 out of 200 applicants graduated. Jessica was one of them. After earning her Ranger tab, Jessica was assigned to the Special Operations Unit, the 75th Ranger Regiment. Here, too, she faced the same prejudices. Team leader Staff Sergeant Rodriguez told her, "Torres, you're a pet project here. We won't put you in the field on real missions." But Jessica waited patiently and looked for an opportunity to prove herself. That opportunity came during the Mosul operation in Iraq. In the summer of 2019, the 75th Ranger Regiment was tasked with rescuing 50 American hostages from what was described as ISIS's last stronghold. According to intelligence reports, the hostages were being held in a heavily fortified compound north of Mosul. More than 200 ISIS militants were guarding the area. The plan was simple: helicopter insertion, fast extraction, minimum casualties. But everything didn't go as planned. When Jessica's team approached the compound, they encountered unexpected heavy anti-aircraft fire. The enemy had anticipated the attack and prepared accordingly. "Mayday! Mayday!" Chief Warrant Officer Williams shouted from the pilot's seat. "We're taking heavy fire. Need immediate extraction." The helicopter was rocking back and forth as enemy bullets riddled the metal hull. When Jessica looked down through the window, she saw the compound, large, heavily defended, impossible to assault. But she also knew the hostages were in there. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez shouted to the team, "Abort mission! We're pulling back!" That's when something clicked in Jessica's mind. She remembered the story her father Miguel had told her. "Mija, sometimes a soldier has to make an impossible choice. Are you ready to make that choice?" Jessica called out to Pilot Williams. "Can you rappel me into the center of the compound?" "What?" Williams asked in amazement. "Torres, are you crazy? There are 200 ISIS fighters down there." "There are also 50 Americans," Jessica replied calmly, "and no one else to rescue them." Rodriguez became furious. "Torres, I'm giving you a direct order. Sit down." But Jessica was already putting on her harness. "Sergeant, respectfully, 50 American lives are more important than a direct order." Jessica went to the helicopter door and looked down. The compound was completely surrounded by enemy fire. Under normal circumstances, this was a suicide mission. But Jessica wasn't a normal soldier. "Give me 60 seconds of cover fire," Jessica called to her team. "Then be ready for survivor extraction." Rodriguez saw her determination and made his decision. "Team, give Torres cover fire. Whatever this crazy bitch's plan is, we're going to support it." Jessica threw the rope down from the helicopter and used fast rope technique to descend into the center of the compound. The moment her feet hit the ground, she was met with 360-degree enemy fire. But Jessica had practiced this exact scenario 100 times during Ranger training in Utah. In the first 10 seconds, Jessica threw smoke grenades, blocking the line of sight. In the next 20 seconds, she used tactical movement to identify enemy positions. At the 30-second mark, she made first contact and neutralized 3 ISIS fighters. Jessica's advantage was surprise and superior training. The enemies hadn't expected a female soldier to make a solo assault. This confusion gave Jessica precious seconds. Jessica mentally mapped the compound's layout. The hostages must be in the main building. But to get there, she needed to pass through 4 different defensive positions, impossible for a normal assault team, suicide for a single soldier. But Jessica used a different approach. She applied guerrilla tactics learned in Ranger training. Instead of making direct assaults on enemy positions, she focused on confusing them. Jessica placed explosive charges on the west side of the compound and set a detonation timer. Then she quickly moved to the east side and took a sniper position. When the explosions began, all enemy attention shifted to the west side. During this distraction, Jessica infiltrated the main building. There were 12 ISIS guards inside, but since they were also focused on the outside explosions, they couldn't detect Jessica. Jessica used silent takedown techniques to neutralize the guards one by one. Within 15 minutes, the main building was secure. Then she went down to the basement and found the hostage room. 50 American contractors were being held there in chained and beaten condition. When Jessica saw them, her heart rate increased, but her voice remained calm. "I'm U.S. Army Ranger Jessica Torres. I'm here to rescue you." One of the hostages, Joe Mitchell, a former Marine, looked at Jessica incredulously. "Soldier, did you come alone?" "Yes, sir," Jessica replied, "and I'm going to get you out alone." Jessica activated her radio. "Base, this is Torres. 50 hostages secured. Need immediate extraction at LZ Alpha." Rodriguez's voice crackled. "Torres, impossible. The compound is still in enemy hands." "Not anymore," Jessica replied confidently. "I'll be at LZ Alpha with the hostages in 2 minutes." Jessica organized the hostage group. The strongest ones would carry the most injured. She planned the route. It was 200 meters from the compound's north exit to LZ Alpha. But those 200 meters were enemy territory. Jessica placed her last explosive charges on the south and east walls. These explosions would confuse the enemy and wouldn't draw attention to the north exit. Jessica briefed the hostages. "Wait for my signal, then run like hell." The explosion started. Jessica shouted, "Go!" and the 50-person group exited through the north exit. Jessica took rear guard position, protecting the group and guiding them to LZ Alpha. By the time enemy fighters began recovering from the confusion, Jessica had already delivered 30 hostages to the safe zone. She evacuated the remaining 20 on the final trip. As the helicopter approached LZ Alpha, Pilot Williams's voice was full of amazement. "Torres, how the hell did you do that?" "Ranger training, sir," Jessica replied calmly, "and a little bit of luck." When the mission was complete, the casualty report was shocking. 50 hostages rescued, 0 American casualties, 47 enemy fighters neutralized, 1 U.S. soldier involved. Jessica Torres had single-handedly made the impossible possible. As the team boarded the helicopter, Rodriguez approached Jessica. "Torres, I owe you an apology. You're a real Ranger." "Thank you, Sergeant," Jessica replied, "but I just did my job." When they returned to base, Jessica's heroic actions were immediately reported to higher command. An investigation team came from the Pentagon and analyzed every detail of the mission. The result was unanimous. Jessica Torres had shown extraordinary valor. 2 months later, at a White House ceremony, the President presented Jessica with the Medal of Honor. The citation read, "Conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at risk of life above and beyond the call of duty."